successful campaigns, and you're looking to help and be service.
You know, when you were here last time, excuse me, you mentioned to me that there'd been a fatal accident down here near Thornhill Apartments a while back. Do you know any of the details of that?
I don't. I just knew that there was an incident.
You know how it happened, or who caused it, or how many people died?
I believe someone was leaving the wild hair and got struck by a car.
Pulled out in front of somebody else, and you don't know whose fault it was?
No, I don't. I didn't know it.
Whether they were drinking, some party drinking.
Right.
No, no. Well, thank you. I didn't mean to press you so hard, but the reason why I was because I don't know if it was just before I saw you last week or just after, but the last few days I was looking through some of my old letters, and I found 2 letters involved in that location in the year. I'm gonna wait this lady gets there takes this one here.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
It's September.
Okay.
I really wasn't planning to do any speaking. I was hoping to have a lot of good speakers here by now. But I'll just mention this because we were discussing it right here.
I'm going to get a deal. I know. You want it now? You okay?
I'm fine.
Thank you.
But anyway, as you know, Lexington started developing down 378, and it just kept going and going. And I thought, well, why doesn't number 1 do anything? And of course, the only reason for it was the congestion going through downtown, you know, Lexington. It used to narrow it down in 2 lanes. And 378, they were able to have 4 lanes all the way by. And that's the only reason I could see why number 1 just didn't do anything. So long as Thornhill Apartments were built and things started happening there. Well, in the year 2000, that was the last year that I was coroner in Richmond County, I noticed that it was really getting seriously dangerous, the speed of people coming over the hill and the number of people going in and out of Thornhill. And I called the highway department. Well, they've had many experiences with me over a long period of time. And because of that, they lowered the speed limit the next day. I called them, and the next day, they had new signs there. And I got results that fast. I mean, they only lowered them, I think, 5 miles an hour to start with, but then they wrote letters to each other and to me that I've recently gone through all the letters that I kept a copy of, and they said this is to each other, this is a seriously dangerous situation, visibility is impaired and all, you know, and so they wrote me after they decided what to do about it. Thank you. Well, the things like that happen all over this county all the time that I think most people just go on by and don't do anything. It probably is somewhat out of frustration. I also found a letter that I wrote in 1981 that a lady was coming in on Bluff Road and into town, and she hydroplaned and hit a tree and was killed. So I called the highway department again, went out there with them, found why the water was on the road. They cleaned the drain out and drained the highway. This pumps out all that. I'm conducting a meeting. If you want to come. It's at the less affected on the way out to Lexington. I gotta go. What's going on now? Yeah, thanks.
Good.
We just didn't like coming to this meeting. But anyway, thanks. But about this accident on Bluff Road, this is why it's this road, this particular accident, all the many ones I could talk about. So I went out with the highway department, pointed out that a drain had stopped up, they cleaned out the sand and the water didn't stand on the road any longer. About 15 years went by and I was driving out that road one cold winter afternoon and I noticed water standing in the same location all over the Bluff Road, covered the whole entire road. And I said, well now, it's almost dark, they're not coming out here tonight to do anything, I'm just going to wait a little more and call them. And I don't believe they would have. So I've been able to sleep at night knowing that the young man who got killed that night was not killed because I didn't do something that night. I'm sure nothing would have been done for the next day. But in the middle of the night, as he drove to work down on Poultry Lane at the pasta factory down there, he hit that same place, but it was ice. I think he hit the same tree. He was killed. 28 years old. I went to his home over in East Oak on Poultry Lane, knocked on the door, woke his parents up, and told them his son just got killed on work because the train stopped up on the highway. Well, now that's been almost 15 years. And I just told someone last night, I said, you know, I need to go out to Bluff Road, crawl down in a ditch. They said, why? I said, because it's time for me to find out if they put this thing on a permanent maintenance plan to keep that drain open, because someone else will die there again. That drain's going to stop up every so many years. But, you know, you wouldn't think that this was the job of the coroner. When I go places and ask people, what does the coroner do? Usually it's a school, you know, young people. They raise their hands. I say, okay, tell me what the coroner does. They say, he pronounces people dead. 9 out of 10 times, that's what they'll say. He pronounces people dead. Well, I always tell them that I remember a friend of mine who was pronounced dead at Richmond Memorial Hospital. He was an elderly man. Got out. I'm just entertaining you since we're waiting.
You're doing good. You're doing good. Come on.
You know, since we're waiting to speak, I'll entertain you a little bit. But actually, I'll tell you, his son, one of his sons was ambassador of Western Adams. I mean, he's still around. And another son's Dr. Julian Adams. And Mr. Bob C. Adams, an old friend of mine, he and his wife had died, he remarried, and went to Weston's house one night, one afternoon, it was still daylight, and he went in and had a drink with his son. And they went out and got in the car, and she was driving, and she started to pull away from the curb, and he didn't like something about her driving. He said, let me out, I'm gonna drive. So she stopped, he got out, and he started around the car, and she backed up. She didn't realize that he was walking behind the car, and she ran over him. So he was transported to Richmond Memorial. They called his son, who was a doctor, Dr. Julian Adams was there. Dr. Raymond, chief of the emergency room, was standing there, and a neurosurgeon, Dr. Dan Paysinger, was standing there, and the three of them, looking at the monitors, said he was died. All the monitors were flat. So they left the room. The nurse called me, said, Mr. Bob Adams died. So I said, okay. So I began to do what I needed to do. I told him to shroud his body, send him down to the morgue, and I began my work as coroner. Well, about an hour later, they called me back and said, well, we were real busy and we didn't do what you said. And for about an hour, we went back in the room and he's alive. So the point is, pronouncing people dead is not a simple matter. And when you're out at the scene, and something's just happened, someone's heart has just stopped beating, it's a pretty good idea to at least have EMS with an EKG to come along. One of you guys run a strip and give it to me. I'm not going to say the person has died. You know, I have seen paramedics also decide someone was dead and cover them up and they were not well, you know, the heart can stop beating for a while. And under some, and then start back. Under some circumstances, like in cold water, I've seen an account of a woman who was underwater for a long period of time without breathing. This was in Europe. She was a medical student or a medical doctor herself, and she survived. But anyway, are you coming to speak to us today? As you just